Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the Mile High Sports Symposium. I'm your host today, Nicholas Manning. You can find me on Twitter at dr_n_Manning. And I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Drew Creasman. You can find Drew at Drew Creasman over on Twitter. You can find his wonderful work at Mile High Sports. He's also doing some really slick 1-minute breakdown videos of your favorite topics for the Rockies, which I super enjoy. One, because I have attention deficit disorder. So 1-minute videos, phenomenal for me. But also, I told you this way back when, Drew. You were one of the things that brought me back to baseball back in 2017, 2018. Loved baseball, played baseball my whole life growing up through high school, all that good stuff. And the intermittent success of the Rockies leaves you. But the way that you had fun on that podcast, you hit us with stats and just some fun topics. The way that you were able to mix it back in the day was got me hooked back in. So whether it's good or bad, I still love the Rockies. And I've tried to root for another team sometimes. It just doesn't take. So I appreciate you. I'm super glad that you're on today. How are you?
Well, I appreciate that, Dr. Manning. Thank you so much. And appreciate you having me on. And that's honestly, that's like the biggest compliment that I could possibly receive. You know what I mean? Because if I help somebody enjoy the game of baseball more, I really do have a fundamental belief that apart from, the journalist side of it, the lower J journalist side, where I do have a responsibility to keep people informed and to tell the truth and all of those things, I think there's just so much cynicism and negativity, especially around the Rockies, but in sports in general. There's so much taking something that's fundamentally supposed to be fun for everybody involved and making it not fun. and so whenever somebody says I've helped them have fun with the Rockies, that is the number one thing that just
love it.
That's what I'm aiming for.
And no one's more successful with making chicken stew out of chicken, you know what, than Drew. Drew, before we get into a whole bunch of Rocky stuff, elaborate. Let us know what's going on. Any later, last pieces that you want folks to work on. I really liked your last article about potential Gold Glove finalist, and maybe Chris Bryant puts it together this year.
Yeah.
So, let us know what's going on. What are you working on? What have you been up to? All that good stuff leading us to this moment right now.
Sure. Article-wise, I am now starting to get into my bold takes and bold predictions for this season, and it's always fun to do those things. I spent most of the offseason fighting with people about the Hall of Fame, and so even though Todd Helton got in, ultimately, I still think there are a lot of fundamental problems with that whole process. And so, that kind of off-season stuff. And so it's going to be a fun and interesting year because I think I've separated myself more and more, especially since I've been at Mile High Sports, from a kind of daily analytical, look, once the team is good again, frankly, I'll do a little more, breaking down every game and that. But right now I'm far more interested in just telling stories of guys like Brenton Doyle, who wasn't a high round draft pick, who wasn't a top prospect, whose general resume this time a year ago was he looks like he's got some good speed. He looks like a good defender. The bat is lagging behind. Now that translated to the bigs, but what we saw was a guy who was the best defender in all of baseball. Those kinds of stories just get me hyped to tell them, to talk to those guys, to figure out how that kind of thing happens. So like you said, my real pride and joy of late has been those 1-minute videos, because telling a story in 1 minute, getting you as much information and entertainment as I can, while also maybe presenting folks with a topic that they might not know a whole lot about. But sometimes it's, a prospect like Zach Veen, who might not know what the story is there. Sometimes it's Charlie Blackmon and people know what the story is and they just want. But those are a lot of fun because I think sometimes you just have to separate yourself from the daily fight over how many games will they win and is the ownership ever going to sell? No. And, do something else. Talk about, hey, what a career Charlie Blackmon had. Hey, look at this pitch that Justin Lawrence threw. Hey, check out this guy in the minors. Or remember, I've got one in the hopper to plug here. Remember when John Gray struck out 16 dudes at Coors Field, right? there, and baseball is a game full of stories and full of these interesting people, and so those are the kinds of things I really love sinking my teeth into.
Yeah, I love it. Your ability to tell a story is phenomenal. Like I said,
Thanks.
the way that you articulate baseball with the energy, with the passion, along with the knowledge is a match made and a field of dreams. So
I appreciate that.
while we're leaning in, actually, I want you to tell me a little bit of Mr. Doyle's history a little bit and what to expect. Like you said, and most people probably don't know how good he was playing, especially defensively, as
Yeah.
well as a few guys that I'll definitely want your take on. But maybe give us a little bit of run on Mr. Doyle and what has that transition been? How's he been doing in the spring?
Right.
And is he a guy that we should be excited about as Rockies fans?
Yeah, I think so. I think in a couple of years, or even by next year, when you're looking at a team that's probably going to be a bit more competitive, he's going to be one of those. Maybe he's not the new Nolan Arenado or Charlie Blackmon of the team. Well, that's going to be like Nolan Jones or things like that. He's that kind of DJ LeMahieu type, right? That guy who is a star to all the local fans, but maybe not as big nationally. Because I do think just with his approach, with the type of swing that Brenton Doyle has, he's unlikely to ever be a superstar hitter. He's going to strike out a lot. He's going to be at the bottom of the lineup. The batting average is going to be low. But I do think he can get enough better there that he becomes an absolute fan favorite. Because if you're hitting, 20 home runs a season, even with a low batting average, you can get on base enough that every time he's on first, it's exciting. Because that's the thing, is like every other part of his game is about as exciting as it gets. He's one of the fastest guys in the bigs. He's one of the best defenders at any position in the bigs. They don't hand out gold gloves to rookie center fielders very often.
Yeah.
It was amazing that happened. He is by leaps and bounds the best defensive center fielder the Colorado Rockies have ever had comfortably. It's amazing to me how good he is out there at taking runs off the board. And I think he's only going to get better for the next couple of years because he's still young enough. The bat probably won't be that exciting, but man, it is. I've been watching teams play at Coors Field my entire life, and I've never seen a center fielder anywhere close to making themselves a defensive factor almost every single game the way he does. It's remarkable.
And that's, huge Dexter Fowler guy.
Mm-hmm.
Teams from yesteryear, and I think being able to say that with the conviction that you do and the scope of watching this team over time, I hope that people understand the gravity of that statement. And
sure,
like you said,
when Ellis Burks played, so maybe my memory.
I did see Ellis Burks. There. Ellis Burks was not a guy that you were like, he's a defensive factor. He's a good center fielder, but
Cargo
not necessarily
played center for a little while. Cargo was good in center. Obviously,
Cargo was really good.
Him more in right.
Right. That's why I won't give those credit. Like Larry Walker played a few games in center,
right,
but he wasn't our center fielder. So I like the comparison to DJ. Right, he impacts the game all over the place, but isn't necessarily someone that's going to get East Coast views,
right,
and those things. But Fangraphs has him projected to hit like 230, 235, 15 home runs, and steal 20 bags. Does that sound doable for what his skill set is?
I think so, and he puts in the work. He finished, his last month, his month of September, he was doing much better. It really is about making contact with him. He was striking out about 35, 36% of the time, even getting that down 5%.
Yeah,
with his speed is going to get him a few, infield hits or bloop hits here and there. And then he does have good raw power. I'd like to see, more than the 15, the closer to 20. If he can be a guy who hits 230 with 20 home runs, then his defense will make him so that he is, for people that if you want to get into WAR or whatever, a 3 to 4 win player, or a guy who's like DJ was for much of his time here, a borderline all-star through his combined value, even if you don't think of him that way. Right.
Love it. Yeah. I mean, that's That would be or should be how we should view baseball. I think for the strong baseball fan, that should be your take. For I like baseball. Maybe I'm not into it. I check stats more, and I think being able to understand the Aaron, for basketball analogy, right? Aaron Gordon isn't a guy that stuffs the stat sheet all the time like Nikola Jokic does, but the way that he impacts it makes that team go. It was how DJ, made it go.
Right.
How some guys in yesteryear did, and the Rockies kind of need that because really it's been, you hope that Chris Bryant or whoever the guys are in the middle hit a bunch, and then that carries it. The biggest mistake I think this organization has made, and maybe even ever, is prioritizing Daniel Murphy over DJ LeMahieu. And you saw that what happened to the team when a guy that does all of the grunt stuff, right? He's going to sacrifice. He's going to hit it to right field. Mm-hmm. He's going to do what needs to be done at the sacrifice of his personal statistical objectives. And you need enough guys like that, so the other guys that weren't that benefit. And a guy like Brenton Doyle being able to be that, just the old-fashioned ball player, as we would say, and it kind of makes it. On the flip side, tell me about Nolan Jones. He was a guy that was traded for a bag of nickels and a box of detergent, and was a high-prized prospect in yesteryear. Really put it together last year, and there's an article in Bleacher Report how he is in the top 3 in organizational building blocks in the entire MLB. Like if you had to look fast forward a few years, 25 will turn 26 during the season. So in baseball terms, got a while to go. Fangraphs has him at 24 home runs, 15 stolen bases, about 270 batting average. What would you take? One, is that low hanging fruit? And then tell us a little bit about Nolan Jones, because I think this is a player that if you are a Rockies fan, he is the guy, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
He's kind of turning into, this is your star of the team, or who is going to grow into that role. But tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah. Do you want me to start with the pump the brakes, measured take?
Nope. I want no.
Or do you just not even want to hear that?
Pumped our brakes with the Rockies for a long time.
You're look, we know the potential downfalls. We know what a sophomore slump is. We know major league pitchers adjust. Okay, well, let's talk about the fun stuff.
Yeah, let's do that.
Nolan Jones has all of the things that you could want a baseball player to have. In the olden days, what happened to me, Nicholas? What happened to us?
I know.
Back in the day, we used to talk about 5-tool players a lot, and then that term got kind of overused. Guys who were pretty good at a lot of things. But it should be understood that Nolan Jones is in an elite class of player who is capable of throwing the baseball at over 100 miles an hour from the outfield, capable of running at an elite caliber speed. He's top 15, top 10% in terms of sprint speed. And his exit velocity is in the top 5%. In other words, he hits the ball hard, he runs real hard, he throws the ball real. These are the fundamentals of the game.
Fundamentals of baseball, yeah. For
He's also 6'5" and an extraordinary teammate, a clubhouse. Whatever the opposite of clubhouse toxin is, or whatever those phrases are, the Rockies have had some good lead by example guys over the years. Nolan Arenado had his style. Charlie Blackmon has his style. Cargo's probably the closest I can come to the leadership style. And yes, Nolan Jones, in just his second year, is already a leader in that clubhouse because of the way the other guys look to him, because of the energy that he brings. And I think just because of a general respect for all of those tools. When you've got a guy like that, ultimately the game of baseball does come down to how often can you get the barrel of the bat onto the good part of the baseball. Right. As fast as you can run, as strong as you can throw, you start striking out too much, and all of that starts to go away. But man, does this guy have the tools not only to be a superstar, to be a super duper star in every category of the game. And that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And I know, you know, pitchers in Major League Baseball have their pride, right? So they will make adjustments. It will be huge to see what Nolan Jones prepares himself and how prepared the organization helps him get into, what the counter is from MLB pitchers this year. But it is really exciting to have someone that looks the part, right? That really, like if they continue to climb, can really be someone that the Rockies are able to, put them on a much more national stage, right? Like this guy is can do it all, and that's phenomenal. You need a few, you need a few lead horses to kind of be that, to be that organization that pushes. So again, 25 years old, has an opportunity really to be something. A guy that has been that in his yesteryears has not been that yet for the Rockies, Mr. Kris Bryant. So maybe give me your take on what you've seen or what you've been able to gather from the spring. And you did have a bold take on Kris Bryant, and what does he need to do for this team to be successful? They are a much better team when he is in the lineup than not. And he lengthens things out, right? If he's hitting behind Nolan Jones, for example, or in front of, he's going to create better at-bats for the guys around him because he's still a very good major league hitter. It's whether or not he plays is the problem. But, give us your as of now, your March 18th, 2024, Kris Bryant take. How has he been doing this spring? And, what do we expect to translate over? And especially as he's playing first base the majority of his time now instead of the outfield that he had been most.
Yeah. I think that's going to take, a lot of the wear and tear of playing in the Coors Field outfield off of him. Obviously, a big deal for him these 2 years has been injuries. And it's really tough to analyze a guy when he's been that hurt. And you do still see things from a fundamental level that he does very, very well. He's really good at not swinging at pitches out of the zone, takes long at bats. He swings mostly at pitches that are in good hitting zones. And even his first year in Colorado, he hit over 300. When he was in the lineup, his batting average was good. The one thing that I think has been scariest about the profile has been the lack of homers and slugging since he's come here. And again, how much of that is you don't have your legs behind you, underneath you, you don't have your full, he's not been fully healthy. And this spring, since you asked about that, it's been really interesting because his overall numbers are like, okay, he's striking out a little bit. I think the batting average is pretty low, but he's hit 3 homers. He's also hit a bunch of foul ball homers as I've been watching these games. I think he's trying to lift the baseball in a kind of extreme way and kind of locking in on that, making sure that he's still got lift and loft. But ultimately, I am just of the mind that if the guy's healthy, he's going to hit. At 32 years old, even with, some injuries, I don't think a former MVP of the league is just cooked. Like, is he ever going to be as good as he used to be? Probably not. But again, if you want to get back to the kind of all-encompassing numbers that help us understand some of these things, he had a 132 career OPS plus in Chicago, right? And in Denver, so 132, that's 32% above the league average. Since being in Colorado, it's that 93 or 7% below the league average. I believe he can be a 110 to 115 guy here if he stays healthy. He's probably never going to be that 130 again, but he can absolutely be a guy who gets back to hitting in the high 200s, gives you 20 to maybe even high 20s home runs if he's healthy enough. At this point, I don't think he's stealing any bags, and his days of being much of a defensive utility are probably behind him. That's why he's stuck over at first for the most part. Though I am curious to see, because he's always been an all right but versatile defender. He's a good athlete and he's a big guy. So I'm curious to see how he does at first base. But, the answer to, I think, the most important question that you asked there is just like, what does he have to do, to help this team? And it really is, it's just hit. He's just got to hit enough that he's an above average hitter. He's probably never going to be worth his contract and all those other things. And that's going to be a conversation that people will continue to have, but he can I was going to say return to being a help for this lineup if he ever was, but he can become a leader in that lineup just by being a pretty good hitter with that veteran experience that pitchers know, like you were talking about. They can't just pitch around these young, scary hitters who maybe have less experience because they know they're going to have to deal with KB.
Yep. Yeah, I hope that Chris Bryant doesn't try and chase his contract. I think that that's what athletes, I think that's probably what most of us get ourselves, that we have to prove people right for, like, in the end, just play baseball. He didn't, like you said, he didn't forget. It's really the confidence and being healthy. Moving to first probably will absolutely help a ton with that. He doesn't need to be a 40 home run guy. He needs to be, 20. If you can get 20 home runs, he's hitting the ball in the gap, which is going to help guys score, which is what we need for sure.
Right.
I think if he plays 130 to 140 games, I will call that a resounding success, because I think
the other
rest
thing.
of it will happen.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And so with that, speaking of a guy who's missed some time, Brendan Rodgers.
Yeah.
In 2022 was really putting it together. I think the back half of that season, he was establishing himself as one of the better second basemen in baseball.
Yeah.
And then last year was really kind of a mulligan to his frustration, and definitely to Rockies fans. So he's back and healthy, projected to do some really good things. But what have you seen from Rodgers? Is he settled in? And should we be excited for what he has to bring as a definitely highly touted, draft pick in yesteryear?
He's in such an interesting spot, man, because you're right. It's like right as it seemed like he was blooming into the kind of star player that we thought, the third overall pick was going to be, and how good he was in the minors and all this stuff. And then he gets like run over in a spring training game and misses almost all of 2023. And just the year before that, he had won a Gold Glove. He got nominated for the Platinum Glove.
Yeah.
He was hitting all these home runs on the road. He was doing this thing, which, by the way, Nolan Jones also did last year, which is very rare, where they were actually performing as hitters on the road.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a ton of high hopes for Brendan Rodgers going into last year. And then, like I said, the thing happened in spring, and it was mostly just a lost season for him. I still think, as much as he's, I think he's 26, 27 now, he's not, I still think of him as this young guy. I met him when he was like right out of high school and stuff, but I still think there's the potential for him to get to that next level because the defense is there. He's a phenomenal defender at second base. He's got to stay healthy, but I do think that he could very much lock it in at the plate. You look at his career, and he's just very rarely had opportunities to get 400 or 500 consecutive plate appearances and really lock himself into a rhythm at the plate. And I think if he does that, he's the kind of talent, he's always been the kind of talent who could be an all-star caliber player. I would say the same thing, honestly, about Ryan McMahon, even though he's had a lot more opportunities. And I think it's more likely that with him, at the plate, it just is what it is. He's going to be streaky, and we know what it is. But I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that at 27, 28 years old, these guys lock in a little better, a little deeper, maybe some, KB being better around, a little lineup protection help. But Rodgers, I would say much more though than McMahon, that it's still in there, that I don't think we've seen the best of Brendan Rodgers yet. And we've seen some pretty darn good Brendan Rodgers for some short glimpses.
Yeah. So speaking of glimpses, give us the rundown on starting pitching. The Rockies will only go.
We were having so much fun.
And we're having so much fun. We were having so obviously we have Antonio Sensatella and German Marquez coming back from Tommy John. There's some thought that maybe one comes back mid-year.
Yeah.
I hope not.
Probably not going to be able to count on a lot from those guys this season. I do think Marquez in particular is going to try to make sure that he comes back and pitches at least at the end of next year or this year a little bit, so that because he got a contract extension as well that goes through 25. And I do think that the Rockies, I don't find it fathomable that the Rockies will find 5 pitchers who are better than Armand Marquez by next season. And I do think that they could be competitive by next season. So you keep him around.
Yes.
I understand that will be right.
Concur.
That said, yeah, you're running with Kyle Freeland. No problems there.
Yep.
Fine with that. Cal Quantrill, who I think is interesting and a new addition. I've really liked what I've seen out of him in spring training. I love his profile. I just don't know if it'll work at Coors, and we're all going to learn together. But he just doesn't walk dudes. He doesn't walk anybody. He keeps the ball on the ground, but he also doesn't get strikeouts. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how he. I think his games are going to be the most fun to watch because the defense is so good. The ball's going to be in play all the time, and you're going to have these Rockies defenders running around making all kinds of awesome plays. But then after those two guys, a lot of people have feelings on Austin Gomber, one way or the other. He's basically evened out to being about a league average pitcher. I still think there could be more out of him. And then beyond that, it's a bunch of guys you're hoping maybe find it. It gets rough. I've got positive things to say about Peter Lambert and Noah Davis and Ryan Feltner and Dakota Hudson, but I don't think if those guys are in your rotation that you're going very far as a Major League Baseball team.
Yeah. Right. Is there anyone on the horizon, in the next couple of years? Maybe that's a Ryan Rollison. Maybe that's whoever there might be. What are some names to keep an eye out on? Because I know that really getting free agent pitchers to come to Colorado has not been desirable. Right. I still, and maybe I'm dumb, maybe we as in the state of Colorado produces some phenomenal high school baseball talent.
Yeah.
Pitching, hitting, all that good stuff. And I think it's more of the contrast from going from altitude to not altitude. Yeah. And your target, where you expect your pitch to break, I think that becomes much more of the issue than necessarily the altitude. So I think there's, in my opinion, it's a little bit more myth. I think it beats up people psychologically. I do think it wears you down a little bit more, all that good stuff. That said, for the Rockies to be successful, they got to draft and develop. Has not been something that they have done well consistently, but the years in which they've had really good pushes, it's been with pitching, who has been homegrown, that doesn't know any better, that isn't scared of it.
Right.
So for this team to be successful, we got to look out for that again. Who are some pitchers that are coming up, whether that be, we get a glimpse of them this year or be on the lookout for next year, when really, hopefully this team is gearing up to really be, in the wild card convo. Hit us with some names with that Drew Creasman brain of who is around that we don't know about.
Yeah, there's a few of them out there. I think the big name that most people might know was their first round draft pick just this last year. Chase Dollander is somebody they've made it clear they're interested in fast tracking. Obviously, performance has to, you can't send a guy out and say, we intend to fast track this guy, and then you send him to Double-A, he gets shelled, and you just move him up anyway.
He just moved it.
He's got to perform.
Yep.
But I think if he does, Chase Dollander is a guy we could see as early as next year, which would be a pretty quick trip through the minors. One of the reasons why I think this year is still not likely, even for a super surprise run, because two of the guys who I think could have helped them with that, Gabriel Hughes and Jordy Vargas. Gabriel Hughes was also a first-round draft pick the year before, and Jordy Vargas, I'm pretty sure, came out of the international program. I got to remember where Jordy came from, but those guys were performing extraordinarily well. Both went down with Tommy John surgery last year, right around the same time that Marquez and Senzatella did. It was like a month of brutal Tommy John news for the Rockies organization. But the good news about that is they're going to get all of those guys back at the same time before the 2025 season. Yep. And so Vargas and Hughes are guys to watch out for, as is Chase Dollander. And there are a few guys that Bill Schmidt brought in at the trade deadline last year when he moved out some of those veteran contracts. Some pitchers who are maybe a little bit further away. I haven't seen as much yet, but Mason Albright made an appearance the other day at spring training, which was fun to see. Tanner Gordon is another interesting guy that they brought in. And so, there are a few of them out there. And, this is a big year for pretty much all of those guys, because if some of them flame out or get hurt or just lose faith in the organization or whatever, then it really is going to be time to, with all of the, they're going to have almost no money spent on anyone other than Chris Bryant, Kyle Freeland. Next offseason will be where they do go out and have to spend some money on pitching, especially if they really don't believe it is coming from inside the organization. But as you pointed out, that's a very difficult thing for this franchise to do. You have to pay a Coors Field tax, and guys might come in and be bad, and then their mental goes south, and then they're Brian Shaw, and it just, we've seen it time and time again. And as opposed to, as you mentioned, guys like young John Gray, Kyle Freeland, Armand Marquez, and Antonio Senzatella taking the team to 91 wins, and then going into Wrigley Field and beating the Chicago Cubs. Like, that, I think, is more recreatable, but they've got to keep making those kinds of deadline moves, get more young guys, and keep drafting well, and draft pitchers, draft all pitchers. I draft 30 straight pitchers, Nicholas. I wouldn't pick a position player.
Why do they not?
I get it. There's a certain amount of, you don't do that, and you got to fill out rosters. But man, I would have a couple of years ago. I think the Angels, which you don't necessarily want to be following.
Fair.
But I loved it. I was like, really? They took like 20 of their first 21 draft picks were pitchers. And I was like, yes, correct. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I would think. I mean, they've never had a problem, they as in the Rockies, with growing bats, right? You've always found guys that can puncture it, and you've never really struggled either with getting guys to come hit at Coors Field.
Right.
So identifying, the elephant in the room and pointing it out and doing something about it. I think what also has always had me concerned about the front office is the lack of investment in the development portion of the administration. Right.
Sure.
So one reason why Tampa Bay is successful is the kind of the oversaturation that they put in. They have limited resources. They put a ton in player development. I've heard pitchers after they've got traded that said the first time that they've heard about spin rate was with the new team. I think that's probably exaggerated, but I do think really putting your limited resources to, if we're going to be a draft and develop organization, then we have to be a draft and develop organization.
Yeah.
You can't really toggle back and forth and committing to one over another. I think will be best for this team. One prospect that I wanted to get your take on that looked like he had flamed out, that maybe reinvented himself as a relief pitcher, a guy with tremendous velocity, and Riley Pint, who had like the real life Shanks and put baseball down for a little bit, and looks like he's done some really good internal work to get an opportunity to come back. Have you status? Is this real? Like, are we going to maybe really see him at the major league level? And if so, what would be something to expect as he's still only 26? So.
Yeah, it's wild, right? The guy has done all these things, retired and unretired by the age of 26. He very briefly made his major league debut last year. He pitched one inning, and actually, I don't even think that's correct. I'd have to look at it. I'm pretty sure he pitched a third of one inning. He went out there, like, he got an out, gave up a hit, walked a couple of guys, and Buddy just took him out of the game. And but I'm a huge believer in Riley Pint. And yes, part of it is that I just want to believe in stories like this. As a storyteller, it helps. But the guy, it's a story of perseverance, man. He's been through a lot, and he's in a really good place mentally. He had a good season last year at AAA. Really starting to harness his stuff. He throws a high 90s to 100-mile-an-hour fastball with a lot of movement, and has a really good changeup to back it up. The thing with him has always been command. He came in walking a ton of dudes. I remember I went and watched one of his very first professional appearances in Grand Junction, and he was throwing the ball to the backstop with some regularity. I mean, he was missing over the umpire's head. It was wild to see, especially at 102 miles an hour.
It is the scene out of Major League. If there
totally, right? I don't want to stand in there against that. But he has harnessed it a bit over the years. I would really love to see him get off to a good start in AAA, and earn his way back up to the bigs and get his opportunity. Because if he can put it all together, he's someone with wicked stuff that should play well at Coors. But the one thing, you can't give away free passes. It's a big in the bigs in general, but at Coors especially. So
yeah, I mean that's always been the killer. It's never giving up the hit or the home run. It's the free bags that you gave up to get there, right? That a solo shot becomes a 3-run shot, and that's always kind of been the thing. Guys got to be able to find the strike zone. I also hope, not only for the story, but having a guy like that, if he were able to be a closer or an eighth, I mean, that's bringing a guy like that at the latter parts of the games that throws with that heat. It really does mess with guys. I mean, it is
there's an intimidation factor.
Hitting baseball is the hardest athletic thing I've ever seen or done in my life.
Yeah,
pumping in a hundo at you. It's I mean, you pucker up in some places you never thought you'd pucker up. And so I hope for that case. But I do want to get your take on. So the Rockies do have some really tremendous youth at the outfield positions.
Yes.
So maybe give us some of your take on where they sit there. There's some really exciting multi-tool athletes who are in the minors, big high draft picks from years, and then Yanquiel Fernandez, who's a international, who I believe is top 3. I think he's the 3rd ranked prospect depending on what you look at, what you read. Zach Veen, who was on his way to becoming a nightmare at the major league level, got injured and struggled some. And then Benny Montgomery, who is a high round draft pick who has all the tools and all the good stuff. So maybe just, what's on the cusp, because I like the one thing I really love about baseball is really the farm system, and there's always someone to be excited about. There's always hope about who your team could be, and you can see it real time versus the NFL or the NBA when it's like, we could draft a guy in 3 years, but who knows? But these guys that are in the organization and barring trade, you're going to get to see at some point. So maybe just your takes on those guys. Anyone that I missed that would be really fun for fans to know, because I feel like if those 3 who all are kind of at the same timetable, they're about the same age, 21, 22. Yeah. If those 3, if we blink, it's 3 years down the road, and that's our outfield, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I am very impressed with those 2 players in particular, Yanquiel Fernandez and Zach Veen, especially when we're talking about the outfield right now. Veen has got all the tools. Again, this is a guy with elite speed, maybe not quite Brenton Doyle speed, but probably Nolan Jones speed. Very, very fast. Great base runner, 86% stolen base rate in the minors. Guy swiped like 86 bags and got thrown out 16 times his first 2 years in the minors. Good power, but maybe not huge power, but it's, progressing. When he was drafted, a lot of people were comparing him to Cody Bellinger. He's got a very similar left-handed swing. He's got some height. He's got some speed, all of those things. He did, I don't know if it's officially break, or he had a wrist injury that basically cost him all of last year. And that's why he's not on top 100 prospect lists anymore. His production was down. So we're kind of in wait and see mode with Zach Veen to see how he bounces back from that. But that's a guy who was the 27th rated prospect in all of baseball by Pipeline coming into last year.
Yep.
So that's the kind of talent they have in him. In Yanquiel Fernandez, not quite as much speed, but he's a good runner. Great arm, huge arm. So if they end up with Yanquiel Fernandez in right field, you could have a situation where the 3 best arms in all of baseball are in there, because Nolan Jones is the best. Brenton Doyle is probably the second best. Brenton Doyle actually owns the all-time StatCast record for the, however you say it, the fastest throw, the hardest throw from an outfielder at over 105 miles an hour. And then Yanquiel Fernandez set a minor league record. I think he did it at a futures game or whatever. He threw somebody out at 100 or something from right field last year. And this is a dude who's got wicked, like 480-foot bomb power.
Yeah.
Fernandez particularly at this spring training, because I think Veen is still kind of getting back into shape and working back into his routine and isn't getting as much playing time. But Yanquiel Fernandez was getting playing time early, and he was hanging in there against major league pitchers, taking stuff that was sliding off of the plate and pulling it left on left into the bleachers at a frozen rope. And I was like, what? So I'm very excited about him. And then the other outfielder that's really emerged in this conversation, who actually has had a better spring training than anyone in the entire Rockies organization, is Jordan Beck, who was taken. He was like a second round pick year ago.
Yep.
And he just seems to be doing everything right all of the time. He's just crushing the baseball. He's taking his walks. He's hit throughout the minors. Like I said, he showed up to spring and basically just forced the Rockies to keep him in camp as long as they possibly could before sending him back down, because they need to start making cuts for the final roster. But he was making a case that he could have made the team out of camp, and I don't even think he's played in AAA yet. But that's how good Jordan Beck has been and how many options the Rockies. And he's another big guy with good athletics and can run a little bit, but you're really looking at a bat there. So yeah, those are the guys, those three in terms of the outfield. And then I'm also super hyped on catcher Drew Romo.
Yeah.
I love when you've got smart, good defensive catchers who bring versatility. He's a switch hitter. I also love that too. It's a dying art.
It really is.
Yeah, I love it, man. He just takes a holistic approach to the game of baseball. He plays as much with his mind as he does with his body. And he's a very, very, very good catcher at an incredibly young age. And so you always hope those guys figure out how to hit.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those, at least if you're a switch hitter, right? You pose that in the lineup as a back end guy. If your defense is MLB ready,
right?
You know, a lot of guys figure it out and become much better hitters than you have, especially if they win the game with intelligence. You can continue to adapt and put yourself in a good position to hit. So I'm really excited with what they have in the pipeline. If you were to tell me, you know, who will make, so it is smart for the Rockies also to kind of wait before bringing some of those guys up just for major league service time, which is kind of it's a crappy business move that organizations can do, and they will. That said, is there a few of those guys that we expect will put their themselves in a position to be called up in August and September, with the eyes on them being a starting blank for the Rockies next year? If there are a few of those guys that you expect, they will be, I believe that if everything, barring injuries and all the stuff that can be foreseen, barring any of that stuff, they're going to be starting for the Rockies in 2025. So look for them, through the summer to the end of the season. Who might some of those guys be? Who would you put your money on?
Yeah, I mean, I think we will see all of the guys we just talked about at some point this year. What's really fascinating about this is in front of them, you've also got two players who are not prospects any longer, technically, because they've played enough at the bigs. But Michael Toglia and Hunter Goodman are two guys who basically are trying to show that they belong, that they can hang at the bigs, that they belong as a part of the core of the future, either in right field or maybe in the future, KB moves full-time to DH and you've got one of those guys at first base. Alauris Montero also plays into that a little bit as well. So if Toglia and or Goodman are having really good seasons, we might not end up seeing some of these guys until much later in the year. But if Toglia goes out there and has a bad couple of months, and because Toglia in particular is in a position where if he has a bad year, I think the organization just goes, okay, we're leapfrogging these guys over him, right? Hunter Goodman, I think, has got a little bit longer of a leash at this point. We haven't seen him at the bigs as much, so give him more opportunities. But I think if they're starting to feel like, okay, it's not working with these guys, maybe they make a trade, again, for some more pitching, which they desperately need. And then you start bringing up Yanquiel Fernandez, might be the first one of those big, exciting guys. Though, again, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Jordan Beck. Fernandez, Veen, and Romo all have more exciting games and more potential, but Jordan Beck is extremely polished at this point in his very young career. It's kind of remarkable to see. And this organization loves a guy with some polish. they do love that. They get less excited than the rest of us do over a guy who can hit at 500 feet and run really fast. They want to see that a guy is taking consistently good at bats and those kinds of boring things that actually do make the difference.
That lead to long-term success.
Exactly.
And consistency. Yeah. What about Grant Lavigne? Is he a guy that because he's primarily first base.
That's right? The thing is the Rockies have so many dudes who can play first base or who primarily first base, starting with the big contract in the organization, right? Big Daddy KB stuck in there as long as he's feeling comfortable. Lauris Montero, who I just mentioned, Hunter Goodman, Michael Tolia. They've even got like Ryan McMahon can go over and play first base. He's done that plenty, though you don't want him to. Aaron Schunk is another guy who can do that some. And so I'd love to see Grant get an opportunity, but boy, is he going to have to hit the cover off of the baseball in order to, at some point you make him go, hey, we have to see if this guy's going to hit big league pitching. Because ultimately hitting is still the most important tool in the game. They find the position for you. What's my position? Hitter.
Yeah. Without that, you're just playing catch, really.
Yeah, right. But first base is clogged.
Yeah, exactly. And so sometimes I think they hold on to prospects too long. I think we probably a lot of organizations do, right? They and maybe err on that side isn't bad. It forces you to kind of see a project or a prospect through, but then we also overrate our own talent. Because we're a little biased on who we have on the roster, hoping that we recognize the log jam and respond accordingly. But I think that there's some really good pieces on this team. I do think pitching will be at the crux of it. I assume too there will be someone that will pitch better than we expect. I expect that there'll be some guys that will perform about where we think that they will, and the team will only go as far as their pitching. That said, I think at least at the major league level, the offense isn't necessarily scary, but I do think the change in philosophy of we're going to get more athletic guys out there, go steal some bags.
Right.
We don't have anyone that's going to hit 40, 45 home runs, so let's stop trying to do that and go steal. You have young athletic guys to go cause some problems on the bases. So I think they're in a good position to do some of that. What do you think overall take? I'm not, a lot has to be done. I won't necessarily ask for your prediction on their record per se. But do you think that we're in line for another, challenging the 100 loss? Or do you think this is a team that will be much more sneaky competitive? Kind of what's your take on what we can expect from this group in 2024?
I mean, I think they're going to be better as long as, and this is a big caveat, they can't experience any key injuries. They are very, very thin right now, and they're relying on a lot of these young players. So I do think there's the opportunity, like you were saying, for them to sneak up on people and be sneakily competitive and win some games, because Freeland and Quantrill are pretty good pitchers. Their position players are going to get hot at times. Their defense is incredible, and they do have some speed. So maybe they'll literally steal a couple of games, right? But kind of like what happened last year, they lost Marquez and Sensatella for the year, and everything went into a spiral. And I could very easily see that happening again. If I don't even want to say, I don't want to put a hex on anybody. I won't say specific names, but there are a couple of key players that if they went down, they're not going to make the postseason this year. So that's the difference between, say, losing 90 games and losing 105 or whatever it is. Right? Like that can be just a few key players. That said, I think they're going to be a lot more fun to watch this year because there's going to be more of those signs that they're actually building towards something. The losses won't be because some veteran guy that you pulled off the scrap heap is out there getting at bats or pitching games that you're going to lose, but that aren't building toward that player maybe helping you win in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this year, if you've got Ryan Feltner or Peter Lambert or Noah Davis on the hill, they've got a very young bullpen, a very young lineup, and you end up losing the game. It's like, yeah, okay. But that's something that 25, 26-year-old players can learn from. And in next season, in 2025, when they've got a little better pitching around them, they'll have that experience.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be able to respond better. And if you look at the teams from like 17 and 18 when they were competitive, that's exactly what happened. A lot of those position players, LeMahieu, Arenado, Blackman, had been on the team since like 2013. Right? They didn't get to the postseason until that young wave of pitching arrived. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen here. So we're going to see a season similar to either 15 or 16, where there'll be a middle rung team, maybe even still end up at the bottom, but the position player unit's going to have you going, okay, get these guys some pitching. And,
yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that they will be a much more competitive in terms of hitting, and defensively they will look the part more often than they won't. Right? I think they'll still probably succumb to really elite pitching, and even probably some pretty good or mostly good pitching, but most teams do.
Yeah.
And having that, and that's kind of at least the scope that I look. I think the 2007, 2009 Rockies, I mean, that's how they got there too, right? It's like you had a couple of vets that you brought in for back end, Josh Fogg, etc. But most of it was Ubaldo. It was right. It was Francis. It was Aaron Cook. Yep, Morales, and it was guys that that got beaten up a little bit, but were still young and naive enough to not be scared of pitching here. And I think that trended well, and it can. You saw it with Kyle Freeland when he, finished top 5 voting for the Cy Young, I believe, right in yesteryear, and it can be done. So I know I get tired of really hearing like you can't ever. Yes, you can. It's whether or not you commit to it. You find guys that have the mental fortitude, and you continue to build around them so they're not carrying it by themselves. So I think it'll be a much more competitive group. I am not looking at wins and losses this year as a success barometer. It very much is. Our, by the middle of the season, are they getting it? Do they kind of find who their answers are and find out who their answers aren't?
Right.
And then, like you said, make some moves to maybe ship out some guys who aren't in their plans for some potential guys that might be. And then you go into next year after nailing getting every pitcher in the draft this summer, and put yourself in a position to feel like, hey, if things go our way, we really can compete for a playoff spot. Because I think that's where you got to get to first. And then once you get there, then we will, our goal is this now, not if things fall. We're deep enough. We have guys that can cover. And right now they're not there yet. But I think we're going to find out who are the guys who are going to be the core group that this team has, when it's ever been successful, has had. Who's the core group?
Right.
Let's identify them and build around them. So you have some shrewd pieces that you can get. And I'm really excited for some of the young talent. I think they're some of the prospects that are coming up, I think, are better than maybe some of the rest of the national media probably gives credence to. And there'll be, international guys who we don't have as much knowledge on as they're entering the system. This team has been pretty successful when they went the international route. And so hoping
guys, the scouting report on Brenton Doyle didn't say the moment he steps into the bigs, he's going to be the best defender in the league. That's not what the scouting report said. Right. But that's what happened.
That's what happened.
Sometimes you've got to let these ball players go out and show you what they can do. They lost 103 games last year. And I could see people saying, well, did they learn anything that year? Yeah. They learned. Talking about learning about guys who are part of your core in your future. They learned about Brenton Doyle. They learned about Nolan Jones. They learned about Ezekiel Tovar. Those are core pieces of your future. And so they just got to do that. They need 3 or 4 or 5 more of those to learn about this year. And please let some of them be pitchers.
Yes, please do. Please do. Let guys work through some stuff. Yeah. Any last stuff before we adjourn for the day, Drew?
Just have fun. let's have fun this year. Yeah, let's, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there are a lot of things in life that are serious, and I love the game of baseball and can take it as seriously as anybody. But it is a game where grown men try to hit a ball with a stick,
Yep.
and so let's keep it in perspective. Let's be reasonable about expectations. Like you said, this season really isn't about wins and losses. It's about, are they building properly toward the future, and are these young players who are going to be that next wave of people that your kids are out there buying Nolan Jones jerseys and
Right.
Ezekiel Tovar jerseys, probably Zach Veen jerseys one day. And these are going to be that new group. And, you know, to what degree do Rockies fans get over what happened with the last era and embrace this new group of guys that, quite frankly, don't have anything to do with Nolan Arenado or any of that rest of that stuff, right? This is a new group of ball players who are putting we're going to put a pretty fun and exciting product, I think, on the field this year. And I, for one, am going to have fun watching them play baseball.
Nailed it. Couldn't have said it better, so I won't try. I appreciate your time, Drew. Appreciate everyone's time in joining us today. For Drew Creasman, I am Nick Manning. This is the Mile High Sports Symposium. We hope you have a great day. Enjoy the sun as it's starting to come back out. And like Drew said, have a little fun. Until next time, peace.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Tempo's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flight miles. So high, I might never come down, so what, this is my lifestyle. Wait a minute.